Let's talk about Corinth. Why was it so important? What was its contributions? And did everyone forget that this ancient city-state was actually the capital of Greece until the 19th century? Hello, this is Anya Leonard, founder and director of Classical Wisdom. You're listening to Classical Wisdom Speaks, a podcast dedicated to bringing ancient wisdom to modern minds. Today's episode is with Dr. Amelia R. Brown, senior lecturer in Greek history and language in the classics and ancient history discipline of the School of Historical and Philosophical Inquiry at the University of Queensland, Australia. We discuss the essential role Corinth played in both ancient Greek history and mythology. But before we begin to delve into the often overlooked city-state, a quick thank you to our Classical Wisdom Society members who make this podcast possible. If you would like to become a society member and help support the classics, please go to classicalwisdom.com and click Start Here. Now, on to all things Corinth. So, can you give our listeners a little bit of background into the history of the city and why it's important?
Yes, Corinth was a very important city in the ancient world, and its legacy is still with us today. Corinth is located in the country of Greece, and in antiquity it was an independent city-state, and then later on it was actually the capital of Greece under the Roman Empire. So today it's not the capital of Greece, but that's only been the case actually since the 19th century.
Wow, that recent.
Yes, since that recently, when Athens became the capital of the modern nation-state of Greece, when Greece gained its independence from the Ottoman Empire.
And it was quite important also mythologically?
Yes, it's very important mythologically. It's where Bellerophon, the hero, is said to have tamed Pegasus, the winged horse, by a special magical bridle that the goddess Athena gave to him. And so that represented not just the taming of a winged horse, but also it represented the technology of taming of horses in general later on, that Athena was said to have given to the Corinthians first. And the hero Bellerophon is actually interesting. He also fought the Chimera, this fictional hybrid creature. And he had some adventures as well in the coast of Asia Minor, what's now Turkey, before returning to Corinth.
And did Jason and the Argonauts go there as well?
So Jason went there after,
Yeah.
So it's also involved in the mythology of the story of the Argonauts, where Jason set sail from his native city, which is in Thessaly, so in northern Greece, on the coast where the modern city of Volos is. He got together the Argonauts, though, from all over Greece, including from Corinth, and then he sailed to the east coast of the Black Sea. He got the Golden Fleece, and with the help of the Princess Medea, and then he sailed back again eventually. But he had altercations with the folks back in Thessaly, so then he and Medea came to Corinth, and that's where he is supposed to have tried to marry the princess, and she said to have killed their children in reprisal. But that's actually the account of the playwright Euripides.
And he's quite a dark fellow, really.
Yes. The Corinthians actually had a myth that it was them who killed her children.
Really?
And then they had to found a cult for the goddess Hera, and they had to make sacrifices, actually offerings to the souls of the dead children every year to get over that blood guilt.
Wow.
So then, Jason and Medea obviously fled from Corinth in different directions. Jason is supposed to have actually been killed by a bit of the Argo ship falling on him, and ended up dead and alone. But Medea went on to further adventures at Athens, where she got together with Aegeus, the king of Athens, the father of Theseus. And then she tried to kill Theseus when he came back. But,
as you do.
As you do, right? She was kind of a witch, a sort of femme fatale, but also sometimes a wronged mother, a wronged wife. I mean, there are lots of different versions of her story.
Yeah, I know Euripides loves making his own twist sometimes on the old famous tales, but I like hearing the
from
version.
mythology. From mythology, Corinth is also famously the place that Sisyphus was the king of, and Sisyphus, who was cursed to roll the rock up the hill and then have it come down again. And the Corinthians had also a different myth about Sisyphus, that he was actually doing the right thing, and the gods punished him unjustly, whereas other Greeks said no, he was punished justly for being a trickster. So he's also a very ambiguous figure in ancient mythology.
I wonder how Camus would take that.
Yes. I don't think Camus knew the Corinthian version of Sisyphus, but you could find out a bit more about the Corinthian versions of mythology through just fragments of ancient poetry. Unfortunately, there's no extant epic or even a lengthy poem by a Corinthian that survives. What we have for the most part is Pindar and his odes to Olympic victors of Corinthian ancestry, and also his odes to victors in the Isthmian Games, which were held at Corinth. And so we can look to that for kind of Corinthian mythology. We can look at Pindar's poetry, and then we can also look at lots and lots of fragments which were quoted by Athenaeus in his Sophists at Dinner of around 200 AD. We can look at that. So Athenaeus and Pindar, but we've lost all of Eumelus of Corinth, who was an important archaic Corinthian poet.
It just breaks your heart
when
you realize all the loss.
Yeah.
So what contributions did Corinth sort of bring to the ancient and modern world?
So besides the mythology that I've been talking about, there's some fantastic historical contributions too that Corinth has made. One is the Corinthian capital, which is, the order of architecture, which was very popular from its development at Corinth in the 4th century BC. It became more and more popular in the Hellenistic era, and then the Romans embraced it and became even more popular under the Roman Empire.
You still see it.
Yes, and you
built
still
today.
See it today. Yeah. Especially because of its popularity for the Romans, it became the standard neoclassical kind of architectural order. So you still see Corinthian columns and Corinthian architecture everywhere around the world. There's also the long-term legacy of their contributions to other forms of art, like Corinthian pottery, which was the first kind of mass-produced pottery of the ancient Western world, that was made at Corinth but distributed all over from Spain to basically what's now Bulgaria, around the Black Sea, even inland to places like Mesopotamia. So Corinthian pottery was very popular early on, and then later on bronze work too. We don't have as much of the bronze, we just have comments on its reputation, and how great the Corinthians were. They also built the first warships that were built in the Western Mediterranean, at least. Supposedly they got the design for warships from the Phoenicians, the people of what's now Lebanon. The Corinthians were big sailors. They were important in innovating and building different kinds of ships, especially warships, also using them to supposedly have the first naval battle, ancient Mediterranean, against one of their recalcitrant colonies, the island of Corfu. So they were great founders of colonies all around the Mediterranean's coasts, especially Syracuse on Sicily, Corfu, also a lot of cities named Apollonia because Apollo was one of their patron gods. They also spread their language, their dialect of Greek, and their passionate interest in trading and in exploring. So they were known for their mercantile expertise, for their skills in making money, and also in city building. And then some Corinthian aristocrats actually even would set up in cities that were controlled by other people. So one of the Corinthian aristocrats, Demaratus, he settles in Tarquinia in Etruria, and then becomes an ancestor of the kings of Rome.
Oh, wow.
So they do travel a lot. They had a reputation in ancient Greece of being very wealthy. So
not everyone can afford.
Exactly.
Corinth.
Not everyone can afford to go to Corinth.
Yeah.
Was the expression, the aphorism, and that means basically things are more expensive there than other places. But it meant that also the best kind of things, the most luxury goods, the most expensive courtesans, were available there. So they had this reputation for luxury, which was good and bad, but which was based upon mercantile wealth. So trading, traveling, manufacturing, all of those sorts of things. And that was greatly facilitated by the location of Corinth, right on the isthmus of Greece. So they're on this little 6-mile wide strip of land that connects northern Greece and the Peloponnese Peninsula. That's the only way by land to all of southern Greece, is passing through their territory. And if you want to go by water, you also, again, have to
go through the canal.
Transit the canal. Now, there were multiple attempts to build the canal in antiquity. So canal building attempts are certainly a legacy of the Corinthians, but nobody succeeded. So it became a kind of example of the impossible thing, like to compete with the gods almost, to try and cut a canal through the isthmus of Corinth.
And now there's bungee jumpers there.
Yes, now there are bungee jumpers there. A number of my students have taken part in that. It was actually a Hungarian engineer for a French company that managed to do it in the 19th century. But in antiquity, the tyrant Periander, who also left his legacy as one of the 7 sages, that tyrant Periander of Corinth, he tried to cut a canal. Julius Caesar tried to cut a canal. Nero, the Emperor Nero, in fact, actually transported thousands of Jewish prisoners from Judea to Corinth. To work on the canal.
Wow, it's like the white whale of the ancient architectural goals.
It was. So that was something they tried to do. Another legacy of Corinth that's still with us today is St. Paul's letters to the Corinthians. So St. Paul traveled there as part of his missionary apostolic journeys to teach not just Jews but also non-Jews about Jesus Christ's teachings in the years around 40s and 50s. So again, under the Emperor Claudius, and then later his successor Nero. St. Paul, he visited Corinth specifically because it was a capital city. And he was very keen on visiting capital cities. And also it had a big Jewish community, not just these prisoners of war, but also Jews who had been there for hundreds of years as part of the Hellenistic Jewish diaspora. And also other Jews who had come there very recently from Rome. He was there. He actually stayed 1.5 years there. So it's one of the cities where he lived for the longest period of time of his ministry. And that means that afterwards, too, he wrote probably multiple letters. We only have the 2 that were collected into the Bible, but there were many others that he exchanged with the community that he had set up there. And those 2 letters are, some of the earliest and most significant, works of his that got collected into the Bible.
That's fascinating. I mean, when you say it, of course, you connect the dots, but I hadn't.
So 13 letters of Paul are in the New Testament, and they're the earliest written works in the New Testament, because the Gospels we think were written slightly later. And there's also 2 of them to Corinth. And actually, if you add up also references to Corinthians in other letters, we have some fantastic, amazing evidence for the city in the first century from those letters, and also his letter to the Romans as well, where he refers to a number of Corinthians in there. So that's really a fantastic legacy too.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Just turning a little bit more to yourself.
Yes.
You know quite a bit about Corinth because you've spent time excavating over there.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the excavation work you've done, and maybe what's the most interesting site?
Sure. Now, I excavated for 2 seasons at Corinth with the American School of Classical Studies at Athens, and the American School has been running excavations at the city of Corinth under the auspices of the Greek government and the Hellenic Ministry of Culture since the 1890s.
Wow.
So it's a very long-running excavation and a wonderful collaboration between Greek and American archaeologists and students. That excavation focuses on uncovering evidence for the history of Corinth, archaeological evidence going back actually to the Neolithic era, and continuing all the way up to the present day, and to evidence of the modern city as it was in the 18th and even 19th century. So it's a fantastic excavation. It has a very long focus. It's also been involved in computer work and in digital projects very recently, and going back to like the 1960s and 70s even. So it's been a really innovative dig for online presence. And you can find out more about it at the American School of Classical Studies at Athens website, and also at ascsa.net, which is a searchable database of results from that excavation.
Okay, I can put the links down below in this video for anyone who wants to follow up on that.
That would be cool, because they've had some grants, I think, from the Mellon Foundation and other benefactors for doing that online presence. But in terms of the excavation that I did, I was really excited to work there under the auspices of the director Guy Sanders in 2004 and 2005, and excavating some incredibly important monumental sarcophagi from the geometric era.
Cool.
So these are intact, undisturbed burials of Corinthian warriors and aristocrats, maybe even tyrants, who were buried in these massive cut stone sarcophagi. And their discovery was really important because it pushed back actually carving of stone in Iron Age Greece back about 100 years. And it's an interesting counterpart to Corinth's reputation in architecture. Their reputation we talked about before for the Corinthian capital, but also they innovated in Doric architecture too, built some of the very first, if not the first, temples with columns and colonnades at Corinth and at Isthmia, at the sanctuary of Poseidon on the isthmus. And then they also supplied stone for temples at Delphi and at Epidaurus.
Oh, wow.
So that early archaic construction aspect has been pushed back even further with these massive cut stone sarcophagi. And inside some of them there were skeletons of the dead still inside the sarcophagus. There were pots. There was a whole set of like drinking vessels. and a spear, I think, an iron spear, because it's the Iron Age, so that's sort
living
of
up to its name.
Yes, living up to its name, exactly. So that was great, and that was published by Christopher Pfaff, who's the new director of the Corinth Excavations, just started last year, and he published that in Hesperia, the journal of the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. But I was really excited to be part of the excavation of those tombs, and that kind of geometric era cemetery of Corinthian aristocrats.
Thank you for listening to Classical Wisdom Speaks, a podcast dedicated to bringing ancient wisdom to modern minds. Classical Wisdom Society members can listen to the entire podcast with Amelia Brown at classicalwisdom.com.